She marched right up to the sheriff's department, demanding they do something about my 30-year-old tractor. According to her, it was an illegal industrial machine ruining property values throughout the neighborhood. She insisted it should be towed away immediately, that I deserved heavy fines, and if I refused to cooperate, she wanted me arrested on the spot. What she never expected was that the deputy who answered the call would end up laughing so hard he actually had to sit down for a minute. But before we get into that, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments, because I genuinely enjoy seeing how far these stories travel around the world. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button, because this story only becomes more unbelievable from here. I'm Russell, 62 years old, and I've called Maple Hollow Lane home for nearly 2 decades. My 5-acre property stretches all the way back to a quiet creek. Long before this neighborhood was divided into an HOA-controlled subdivision, the entire area was working farmland. Sitting beneath a simple metal shelter beside my house is my grandfather's old Ford tractor, a 1974 model that I personally brought back to life after spending 2 full winters restoring it. I use it to mow my field, haul loads of firewood, and every winter I help elderly neighbors clear snow from their driveways. It's nothing fancy, nothing especially loud, just an old machine that belongs to me. Then, about 3 years ago, everything changed when a new HOA board took control, led by a woman named Deborah. You probably know the type. She carried a laminated copy of the rulebook everywhere, never showed up without a clipboard, and spoke to people with the same tone a teacher uses on a kid who forgot to do homework. Without ever introducing herself or asking me a single question, Deborah decided my tractor had become a neighborhood problem. It all started with a notice taped to my mailbox. There was no phone call, no knock on the door, only a printed warning that read, "Unauthorized industrial equipment must be removed within 10 days under HOA Bylaw 4.2. I couldn't help but laugh. That tractor had been parked in the exact same place since before this HOA was ever created. There wasn't even a Bylaw 4.2 covering farm equipment. I'd read every page of the governing documents when I bought the property, so I knew that for a fact. But Deborah wasn't about to let it go. A week later, she showed up herself, clipboard tucked under her arm, telling me my so-called commercial construction vehicle was, in her exact words, an eyesore that damages the aesthetic standards of this community. I calmly explained that it wasn't construction equipment at all. It was simply a 1974 lawn tractor. She had no interest in hearing the facts. Winning the argument was all that mattered to her. That's when it finally hit me that this situation wasn't going to be solved with a respectful conversation. The funny part is what happened about 3 weeks later, when a sheriff's deputy stood in my driveway laughing so hard he had to brace himself against a patrol car. None of us could have predicted that moment. Not Deborah, not me, and certainly not that old tractor. But before we get there, you need to see just how far Deborah was willing to push this ridiculous fight. Over the next month, the violation notices never stopped arriving. First, the fines were $50, then $100, then $150 every single week because they claimed I was refusing to comply. I challenged every citation in writing. I attached current photographs, copies of the county zoning regulations, and even the original deed proving the land had agricultural use long before the HOA's governing documents ever existed. Deborah ignored every bit of it. At every HOA meeting, she brought my tractor up again, convincing a handful of homeowners who had never even laid eyes on it. She started describing it as a danger to the public, insisting children might be hurt because it was what she called an attractive nuisance. Ironically, both of my next-door neighbors stood up for me. One of them had relied on that same tractor to clear her driveway after a heavy snowstorm the winter before. But Deborah wasn't interested in facts or fairness. She wanted a victory she could proudly post in the neighborhood Facebook group, complete with a picture of my tractor and the caption, "This is what our community is forced to live with." By the 5th week, the fines had climbed beyond $600, and a certified letter arrived threatening to place a lien against my property. That was the moment Deborah decided paperwork wasn't enough anymore. She wanted the sheriff involved. I wasn't at home when she made the call, but within an hour, 3 different neighbors told me exactly what happened, and every version matched almost perfectly. Deborah walked to the end of her driveway, called a non-emergency number, and reported that there was an illegal industrial vehicle sitting on my property. She claimed it wasn't permitted, might have been stolen, and was possibly leaking dangerous fluids into the neighborhood water supply. She repeatedly called it an immediate safety threat. She described it as unauthorized heavy machinery. Then she demanded, "I want it removed today." According to one neighbor who overheard much of the conversation from her porch, the dispatcher asked Deborah to describe the machine more carefully. Deborah reportedly claimed it was about the size of a bulldozer, painted industrial yellow, covered in rust, and had exposed mechanical parts that created a serious danger for neighborhood children. About 40 minutes later, a deputy was sent to investigate. I arrived home just as a patrol car rolled slowly into my driveway with no lights flashing. Moving so casually that it should have been obvious to Deborah this wasn't being treated as any kind of emergency. She was already waiting near the edge of my property when I pulled in, arms folded across her chest with a look of complete satisfaction. Before the deputy had even finished stepping out of his cruiser, Deborah hurried straight toward him. "There it is," she announced dramatically, pointing at my tractor as though she were presenting crucial evidence before a jury. "That's the illegal industrial vehicle. It's been sitting there for weeks. It's dangerous. It's a serious safety hazard. It's unregistered, and honestly, I can't believe no one has dealt with this sooner." The deputy, probably somewhere in his mid-30s, looked at Deborah first, then his eyes shifted past her and settled on the tractor. For several long seconds, he didn't say anything. Finally, he spoke. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "could you point out exactly what part of this machine is causing the problem?" Deborah swept her arm toward the tractor as if the answer was obvious. "All of it. It's clearly commercial equipment. It has no place in a residential neighborhood. I want it cited, and I want it removed immediately." The deputy walked toward the tractor without saying another word. He knelt beside the front axle, brushed away a little dirt, and examined the information stamped into the old metal frame. A moment later, he stood back up. I could actually see the change in his expression. He looked at Deborah. Then he looked at me. Then he glanced back at the tractor. "Ma'am," he said once again, doing everything he could to keep a straight face, "do you happen to know what year this tractor was built?" Deborah frowned. "That has nothing to do with this." "It actually has everything to do with it," he replied. "This tractor is older than I am." Then he explained exactly why. It was a 1974 Ford tractor built for residential property owners, small farms, and rural acreage. It was never intended for industrial construction work or commercial job sites. Because of that, it had never required any type of commercial permit, not in this county and not anywhere else. Then he smiled. I recognized it the second I saw it. My grandfather owned this exact same model when I was growing up. He turned back toward Deborah. "This isn't industrial equipment," he explained. "It's basically an oversized riding mower with a plow attached. Honestly, the mower I use at home looks more intimidating than this." Deborah immediately tried to change the subject. "Well, regardless, it's ugly and it's obviously creating a nuisance." The deputy politely interrupted before she could continue. "Ma'am, you reported this as a public safety emergency. You told dispatch it was leaking hazardous fluids and putting neighborhood children in danger." He paused for a second before adding, "I need to be honest. I drove out here expecting to find actual heavy machinery. Instead," he gestured toward my tractor, "what I'm looking at is a 50-year-old farm tractor parked on its owner's private property." That's when it happened. He laughed, not a polite chuckle, not a quick smile, a full, uncontrollable laugh. He bent forward, resting one hand on his knee while trying to catch his breath. "I'm sorry," he managed to say between laughs. "I really thought I was responding to a complaint about a bulldozer." By then, Deborah's face had turned bright red. Several neighbors had already wandered outside after noticing the patrol car. Even though the emergency lights weren't flashing, the sound of a deputy laughing in someone's driveway was enough to draw an audience. After collecting himself, the deputy stood upright, cleared his throat, and finished the call as professionally as possible. "Ma'am, there's no violation here." Then he added one final piece of advice. "I'd strongly suggest avoiding calls like this in the future. Misusing the non-emergency line can result in citations of its own. Deborah didn't respond. She spun around, crossed the street without another word, and disappeared into her house so quickly that I almost expected to hear the deadbolt click from where I was standing. One of my neighbors couldn't resist. Well, he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. That was definitely worth watching. News spread through the neighborhood almost immediately. Within 2 weeks, every single HOA fine quietly disappeared under the explanation of an administrative review. For quite a while after that, Deborah stopped attending HOA meetings altogether. As for my tractor, it's still parked beneath the same metal carport where it's always been. It still cuts the same field it's been maintaining for decades. And every single time I start that old engine, I remember the deputy doubled over with laughter in my driveway. It still makes me smile. But believe it or not, Deborah wasn't the last HOA board member who decided to pick a fight with me. About 6 months later, another neighbor tried something even more outrageous. Only this time, it wasn't just one deputy who ended up laughing. An entire courtroom did. If you want to hear how that story unfolded, make sure you're subscribed to HOA Revenge Stories, because it's coming next. And trust me, it's even crazier than this one. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to leave a like, and tell me down in the comments what you would have said to Deborah in that moment. I'll see you in the next story.